Good morning. Welcome to John's D&D Vlog, episode number 18. I'm going to start talking about modules from time to time. I was always a big fan of modules. I see them as novels your players can interact with, written by people who know what they're doing. So I like giving them my time. I know homebrew is important to people, and I like doing homebrew too, but the modules themselves are such an important part of D&D history that I really like to use them. So of course, if you're going to start talking about modules, the one you need to talk about first is always going to be B2, the Keep on the Borderlands. With these module reviews that I do, please, if you're a player, don't watch this because I'm going to be giving away stuff that will make your experience less fun. So please don't watch this episode any further if you're a player. So this was my very first module. My neighbor, he was the guy who got us into D&D, and he had the basic set, and this module came in the basic set. None of us really knew what we were doing. This happens to be an introductory module. It's for new characters, but honestly speaking, it's also for completely new players. It's a very simple module to play, and it's a very simple module to run as a DM. So if you're a new DM, this is actually a pretty good module for you to start with. You're going to find one problem when you very first start your very first game. New players very often don't really understand what's expected of them. They don't know what they're doing. A lot of them, after they roll up their characters, can't think of any reason to actually get up and go out the door. So as a DM, it becomes your job to give them reasons to go. So, like in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo is given a ring by his uncle. Then a wandering wizard shows up one day and tells him that he needs to take the ring, which happens to be extremely evil, and he needs to take it far away and destroy it, or the devil, if he gets a hold of it, may destroy the world. So, with that, Frodo now has a very good reason to get up and start his adventure. In The Hobbit, the same wandering wizard speaks with Bilbo and talks him into joining a party to help a bunch of dwarves reclaim their homeland from a dragon. Bilbo now has a reason to go out the door and start adventuring. Anyway, in both instances, this is called a hook. It's the device the storyteller uses to grab you and pull you into and through the rest of the story. When I do this module, I tell my players that their father has disappeared. They're all like in the same family, or at the very least, they live in the same community, and one of them is a farmer. And his father, who is also a farmer, promised to be home for lunch. But when everybody shows up at the table for lunch, the father's not there. So he and his friends, or he and his brothers and sisters, go out to try to find out where the father is. And in the fields where the father was working, instead of finding the father, they find giant-sized footprints. And it seems like in that area there had been a fight. Also, next to the footprints, there are two long grooves that very easily could have been made by the backs of the father's shoes if he had been dragged away. Later on in the module, there's a room full of slaves. You can have one of those slaves be the father of the PCs. Anyway, the children looking for the father, that becomes the hook to getting your players into B2, Keep on the Borderlands. Anyway, you're going to need a hook. And here's a couple of home pages. They're actually made by the same people. And both these pages are actually really good. They're full of all these different sorts of hooks that you might want to use on your PCs. If you are a brand new DM and you're taking a bunch of brand new players through this module, you might want to take a step back and think about the big picture first. I suggest you check out my blog, episode number 14 on creating a campaign. It's really cool to have a story that stretches all the way through several modules, and now's a very good time to start thinking about that. Like, where are you planning on bringing these guys? What potential future possibilities are you hoping to bring them to? So anyway, if you start thinking about the greater campaign now, you can add little foreshadowed parts to your story that might not matter to this particular story, but will matter several modules down the line. It just gives the entire experience a much more fuller feel if you can tie everything in and have a big story that stretches throughout many stories. So anyway, it's just something to think about. Episode number 14, please check it out. So from here on out, I'm just going to share war stories with you. War stories in D&D are where I actually tell you what actually happened in my own campaign as I read the module. So it's one thing to talk about the module kind of theoretically, but then when you actually hear about what happens in practice, it really helps you understand what might happen in your game as well. So anyway, here I go. The maps I'm going to show are maps that I drew myself. These aren't the ones supplied with the module. I always redo all the maps. There's a lot more information that I want when I'm running the game. I went through this with a younger group of players and their mothers. The children were between 8 and 10. It was a group of 7 characters. 2 of the players had 2 characters each. In my campaign, we don't do any of the creepy stuff that some people like to do. We don't talk about brothels. We don't do any murder hoboing. When I run it, for kids especially, I make it feel as much like Lord of the Rings as I can. It's about as G-rated of a D&D game as a D&D game can be. So just keep that in mind as you're listening. I used that hook that I mentioned previously. One of the PC's fathers had disappeared. They found the tracks and they followed them for over a day, and the footprints eventually led them to this keep. A keep is basically a small fort or a small castle. The walls are sometimes made of wood, sometimes of stone. In B2, the walls are made of stone. At the keep, they found a hill giant trying to beat down the door, as all of the wall guards were simply looking down on him. This is actually just a bravery test. If the PCs attack this giant and try to defend the keep, then the people inside the keep will treat them one way, but if the PCs choose to be cowards and not attack, the people inside the city will treat them very different. So how they react to this giant beating on the front gates of the city can change the story actually quite a lot. So anyway, my group chose to attack the giant. I let the giant swing at them once in retaliation, and he did hit and knocked one of the players unconscious, but he didn't kill him. But then as soon as he did that, from the wall, I let the archers immediately kill him. One hit from a hill giant, odds are it's not going to kill even a first level PC. Anyway, the wounded PC was healed pretty much immediately by a member of his own party, but even if a member of his own party wasn't capable of that, there are clerics in the city who would have been happy to heal him. So anyway, because the group was brave, they were allowed into the keep. They were healed and fed and were propositioned by the leader of the keep, the Castellan, to solve a problem they were encountering recently. The keep was under constant daily attack. Months previous, some of the farmers who worked the lands around the keep were attacked while they were working. The attacks increased until pretty much everyone in the area now lives within the walls of the keep, and nobody really is brave enough to go out anymore. And the food that they have in the walls of the keep is getting pretty low. And to make matters worse, recently the numbers of these monsters are growing to such a point where they're actually beginning to assault the keep itself. Anyway, the Castellan told them that there just aren't enough men in the keep under him to protect the keep, but also to go out and try to figure out a solution to the infestation. They need a group of warriors willing to go out and end the problem for them. The group was then offered 1,000 gold pieces if they succeeded in neutralizing the threat. So they now had a base of operations and a place to live. So they re-equipped and went out the next day. The first place they went to was the Lizard Man Hill. While they examined the top of the hill, the lizardmen exited via a secondary entrance and attacked them from behind. It was a hard fight, and during the fight the lizardmen attacked to the last man. They never ran. The PCs noticed this, but didn't really choose to think about it any further than that, and just basically enjoyed killing lizardmen. It seemed a little egregious to me, so after the fight, when they went into the lair looking for treasure and found all the young and the eggs and still didn't seem to care, I chose to punish them a little. They didn't realize that the lizardmen were just protecting their lair, that the lizardmen weren't actually evil. They were just protecting their families. So I chose to punish them a little. From that point on, I made it so that whenever a cleric cast a Cure Light Wounds spell, it would only heal for 2 points. I then informed them that if they didn't find some way to repent for their bad behavior, the clerics might even stop being clerics. They would just become fighters who only used 8-sided dice to determine their hit points. They paid attention to that. That was a big deal to them. The group decided to gather up the young and the eggs and bring them into the keep. They spoke to the Castellan, and the Castellan offered to find people in town who had raised them. He asked the PCs, though, to help out with the cost for bringing them up. So, what would you charge to raise 14 lizardmen to maturity? The Castellan asked for 1,000 gold pieces. The group conceded and began to pay for it, but they didn't have enough, so they had to pay it monthly. Anyway, it ended up being a pretty memorable experience. They would walk through the city and they'd see women pushing baby carriages, and inside was a lizard man. So they laughed. They thought it was fun. They never found the spiders, and the fight with the raiders was pretty simple for them. The Mad Hermit, though, ended up becoming a pretty interesting encounter. In the module, it says that the Mad Hermit is crazy and has a mountain lion for a pet, but it doesn't go into detail, though, on how he is crazy. So when the PCs met them, I just said the first thing that came into my head. I had the Mad Hermit jump up and down and scream, "I want bananas, I want bananas," and then he pulled out a weapon and said, "Give me bananas now or I'm going to kill you." So the PC's reaction was pretty interesting. They didn't just attack him. They went back to the keep and they bought bananas, and then they came back and they gave them to him. The Mad Hermit was happy, and the PCs just continued on their way. That wasn't the end of it, though. I had the Mad Hermit follow them around, always asking them for more bananas. The group started calling him Banana Man. One time, though, the Hermit actually followed them all the way to the keep, and when the guards saw him interacting in a peaceful manner with the party, the guards became suspicious. The guards knew about the hermit and knew he was responsible for some of the deaths of some of the citizens of the keep. So when they saw that the group was on friendly terms with them, they wouldn't let the group back into the city anymore. Then, because the group couldn't get Bananas anymore, Banana Man actually did attack him, both him and his lion, and the party had to kill him. It ended up being a pretty trippy session for the party that day. When the guards, though, saw that the hermit was dead, they allowed the PCs back into the keep, and everything just kept going. If I had just announced from the beginning, though, that the hermit was just a crazy guy and then had him attack them, the entire fight would have been over pretty quick, and everyone would have forgotten about it. Because we actually went in a little bit into the role-playing, though, the experience became extremely memorable, and my personal opinion is that those kids are probably never going to forget about it. It was just a weird encounter. Anyway, as far as the Cave of the Unknown goes, I ignored it. Were I to do this today, though, I would find some way to have it mesh into my greater campaign. I was even considering turning it into the module S1, the Tomb of Horrors. I would find a way to make it so the players couldn't go into it, but they would somehow bump into it, or it would somehow become foreshadowing for the time in the future when I did try to run them through it. Perhaps Asarak would find some way to come into communication with them. He is an extremely high-level wizard. Perhaps he could find some way to communicate with them and become some sort of an evil guide to them for the rest of their campaign until they actually finally came back to the Tomb of Horrors to destroy him. Nonetheless, it's a really big idea. It's a really good idea if you can find some way to address your greater campaign at some point within your module, and honestly speaking, the Cave of the Unknown seems to be a pretty good opportunity for that. Here's my map of the Caves of Chaos. I always draw my own maps. I really like knowing what's in an area and in the surrounding rooms of an area. It's important to know how what happens in one area will affect the areas around it. It's really hard to keep looking stuff up all the time, so I like putting that data on the map. What I noticed about the caves is this. It appears that the alphabetical order of these cave entrances, A to K, also seems to be the best order for the players to go through them. Stuff gets harder the higher the level of the entrance you choose to go through. So A is kobolds, B and C orcs, D and E goblins, F hobgoblins, G and I weird stuff, H bugbears, J gnolls, K more weird stuff, and then you finally get to the evil temple. They call it the Evil Temple of Chaos. One thing I noticed about this place that I thought was actually kind of interesting. So this entire complex is basically just an evil temple surrounded by stuff designed to protect it. Well, that really reminds me of T1, the Temple of Elemental Evil. It seems like the Keep On to the Borderlands is actually just a smaller, lower-level version of the Temple of Elemental Evil. So it's just an interesting attitude you might want to have about the module as you run it. In pretty much every survey I've ever seen where the public is the one doing the voting, Keep On the Borderlands always comes out on top. By far on top. It is by far the most popular module out there for 1st and 2nd edition. I'm sure that it's just because it was in the basic sets and it's pretty easy to run, so a lot of people did it. People really do love it though. Mentally, it's as deep as you want it to be. It can be extremely simple or really profound if that's what you want. It's all up to you. I made a DM's guide for this module. My version has the maps. I'm sorry, I don't let the maps out to the public, but I do have experience point lists. That seems to be a convenient thing to have access to. And also, I give my own advice on how to run the module correctly. Anyway, if you'd like to download it, please just look in the description field just below this video and you can find a link to it. So I guess that's it for this week. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate the subscribes and the likes and the comments. Please keep them coming, and I'll see you again next week. Have a nice day.